Good morning, and today we are going to make an orange glow chiffon cake. And this cake is relatively simple to make. I mean, it has a lot of steps, but they're pretty straightforward. Where students get into trouble is they don't carefully read the instructions. And so cakes, as most baking items, are unforgiving, and so you really need to pay attention to that. For this recipe, you are going to be doubling the recipe. So please get your math checked and work with your teacher to make sure you have the right amounts. All right, so we're going to get started, and it says preheat your oven to 325, and that's done and taken care of. Then it says in this bowl we are going to mix the flour, which is 2 1/4 cups, and the sugar, but it says all but 2 tablespoons of the sugar. So what happens is students look up here and they say sugar, oh, I need 1 1/2 cups, and they dump it all in there. But later in the recipe it says we were supposed to save 2 tablespoons of sugar. So students then don't have any sugar for the meringue that they need later. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out 2 tablespoons of sugar, and that will be used in my meringue. So there's 1 tablespoon, and there's my 2. So this I am using for later in the recipe. Okay. Now I can add all of this sugar in here. Then I'm supposed to add my baking powder and salt. So here's my baking powder, and the baking powder is going to chemically leaven the cake to force it to rise. Okay. And baking powder is basically baking soda and an acid combined. Okay. And baking powder works when it gets wet, and baking powder works when it gets warm, which is why it's called double acting. It works twice. Okay, so I'm going to turn this on, and hopefully by now you guys know you turn powders on at low speed, otherwise you will be wearing it. Okay, so the purpose of this is just to incorporate all of those different ingredients together so nobody gets a piece of cake that's all salt. Okay, all right, so it says we're supposed to do that for 1 minute, and that's going to also break up any clumps in the flour, so it's kind of in place of sifting all of these together. So I'm just going to kind of bring those down and mix it a little bit more. And then I will go on and tell you the next step. What we're going to do next is we're going to make a well in the center of these dry ingredients. And we're going to dump all of our liquid ingredients into that well. Okay? So I'm going to turn this off. Lift this up. And I'm going to make a well. A well just means you kind of make a hole in the middle, like a bowl inside a bowl, okay? And that's where I'm going to put all of the other ingredients. So in this we need to add the oil, and we have pre-measured all of this to make our demo go smooth. Okay. And we needed a 1/2 cup of safflower oil. And we needed 7 egg yolks. Okay, so these are all of our egg yolks. And the whites we are using later to make the meringue or the foam. Okay. 3/4 cups of orange juice. That'll help give us some orange flavor. Orange zest, and as a quick review, if you remember, in order to zest it, you can use a small hold grater, and you just go and you grate the orange part off. You don't want to get all of this deep white. You want to still see a little bit of color here. If you get to the white, that's pretty bitter, all right? But you want to try to get all the orange, and zest is used a great deal in baking. You've used it before in class, so this is our 2 tablespoons of orange zest. Okay. And then our vanilla. And we need 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So we are supposed to beat this for 1 minute or until smooth. Okay? Again, slow speed or you're going to get a bath. Okay? You can turn that up as that flour gets incorporated, but with cakes you very seldom beat at high speed. Medium is usually the limit. So I'm going to watch the clock. We've already been going for 10 seconds. You're going to let that get nice and smooth. I'm going to stop it around 30 seconds to scrape it down, and then we'll be back after the minute. As you can see, our cake batter here is nice and smooth, and so I'm going to take this off, and the cake batter is not done, but this part of the process is done. Okay? All right. All right, there we go. So I'm going to leave this here until our next step. All right, and I'm just going to wipe down any batter that might have splattered on our mix master and move to the next step. So for the next step, you need a clean bowl and a wire whip attachment, and we are going to beat our egg whites into a foam. All right, if you've ever had like a meringue pie, a banana cream pie, you know, where it's got the big white baked on top, that is baked egg whites. That's just egg whites. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to beat the egg whites until frothy, and we've already separated these. Now, when you separate egg whites, for the purpose of being used in an egg white foam, there cannot be any egg yolk in those egg whites. And we have gone over before the proper way to separate eggs so that if you accidentally break one egg yolk, you're not ruining all 7 egg whites. Okay? So we are not going to do that for this demo. All right, so to beat these until frothy, you turn them on until they kind of look like bubble bath. Egg whites can be beat on high. All right, so there, we kind of have, it's nice and bubbly, that's frothy. So now we're going to add our cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is tartaric acid, it comes from grapes, and it's a stabilizer. So what it's going to do is it's going to make these bubbles hold their shape. So if you've ever played with bubbles, you know, where you dip the stick in and blow, the bubbles come out and then they break really, really easy. This cream of tartar stabilizes the bubbles so they can't break easy. Okay? So they hold their shape. So I'm going to turn that back on. And I need to scrape this down with a clean rubber scraper. You cannot use the same one you did before. Some of my cream of tartar is stuck on the bowl. Okay? Now we're going to beat this until it forms soft peaks. And what's going to happen is this is going to turn colors. Right now it's kind of a yellowish white. It's going to turn a bright white. And when it's at soft peaks, we'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, these are at soft peaks. If you look, it's still not a bright white. It will turn a bright white. The way you know it's at soft peaks is you pick up the mixer and it just barely folds over. All right, so you can see our peak there fell over. Okay. If I take this off and flip it, it falls over. Okay, it's kind of hard to see on here. It's actually easier to see in the bowl where the peak falls over. It comes up and then goes back down. So what we're going to do now is we're going to keep mixing it, but we have to add in our sugar. And the sugar you just sprinkle on top as it's mixing. You don't want to dump it all in once or it'll break bubbles. So you want to sprinkle it, and then we're going to mix it until we have stiff peaks, which means they stand up. And I will show you what those look like when we get there. So I'm going to sprinkle in my sugar. Turn my mixer up, and we'll be back in just a minute. It took only about 40 seconds. It's very quick. The way you tell it's stiff peaks is you can pull this up and the peak stands up. Remember, in soft peaks, this fell all the way down, okay? But when it's stiff, it'll stand up. And that one curled just a little bit, but it's standing up very nicely. So that's when you know you're done. Now, the trick here is to get these two married, all right? We want to incorporate the foam into the batter, but we don't want to stir like a crazy person because we want this foam to stay foamy. We want it to still be air bubbles. So the term that's used is fold. We're going to fold it in. And I explained folding is very, very gentle stirring. So we're going to put this in here. And again, this is just raw egg whites with a little sugar and cream of tartar added. Okay, but air makes it very opaque, and in this case, a bright white. So I'm going to take my spoon across the bottom and across the top. Okay, and I'm just going to keep doing that and very gently incorporate this foam into the batter. Now, the reason for the foam, one, it's going to give this cake a great deal of volume. And the way that's going to happen is obviously it's got volume itself, but when it bakes, all the air bubbles in this foam are going to expand because they're going to get hot. And as they expand, the cake rises because the bubbles got to go somewhere. They don't pop, they just fill with air and get larger. Okay. Almost done here. You will see some streaks of white. That is perfectly okay. You just don't want any, great big sections of white or great big sections of yellow. So I think we're good here. Now we're going to pour this into our tube pan. A tube pan has a tube in the middle. And the reason for this is this cake is going to almost fill this pan. Well, if there wasn't something hot in the middle of the cake would never cook because it's too dense, it's too thick and too tall. So this tube allows it to cook in the middle, from the middle out, because the tube gets hot, and then obviously the pan gets hot and it cooks this way, and then the whole cake ends up getting cooked. Now, with these cakes, you don't grease them. And the reason you don't grease them is this cake is going to climb up the side of the pan as those air bubbles expand. And if it's greased, it just slides. It can't catch on to the side of the pan and kind of climb up the side of the pan. All right? So I'm going to pour this in. Now, the neater of a job you do this, the less your cake's going to burn, and I will show you what happens. It's very important that you clean up these pans because they're going to be in the oven for an hour. Okay? So I poured it all into one spot and it ran where it needed to go. And I'm going to clean up my bowl because in here are several pieces of cake. Okay, we'll scrape it one more time. Now, sometimes when students do this, they get cake batter all over the side. You can see I've got some here and a little bit over there. So I'm going to wipe those off. Since the cake's going to be in the oven for 55 minutes, those would be very, very burnt. Okay? All right, so we're going to clean that up. Next, as we were pouring this in, and since it's a thicker type of batter, you can get big air pockets in this cake batter. And then that creates a big hole in your cake because that air pocket expands. So to prevent that, you can take a straight edge, you can take a knife, and you're going to slice through the batter. So you just put it here, and you make some slices through the batter, and just go all four directions, and that will break any really large air bubbles that are in the cake batter. All right. I'm going to put this in the oven 55 minutes. Obviously your teacher will have to take it out because class isn't that long. And then for cooling it, since you won't see this in your class, cakes cooked in a tube pan are cooled upside down. All right, and that is so gravity works when they're flipped upside down and they hold their height because they cool then in that long thing. They can't just start sinking because they're stuck to the bottom of the pan. All right, so then they'll hang and that helps them keep their height as they're cooling and then they're set. Okay, So tomorrow we'll make the glaze for your cake. Our orange glow chiffon cake is out of the oven. So it's been cooling upside down. So when I flip it over, you can see it still has all of that height. It did not collapse on itself. So now we have to get this out of the pan. Just use a standard bread knife, and you're going to go all the way around the edge. Now you also have to go around this middle too, all right, because it's stuck there too. It also climbed up that too, all right? And then you can flip it over, and I'm going to slide the knife under here and just twist. Okay. And then I'm going to take this and slice right along this pan, and at some point it should hopefully drop down. There we go. Okay. Beautiful. Now I'm going to flip this back over. All right. Now the recipe does not call for a glaze on this, but we often make one. If you recall, when you made this, you had an orange. And you can actually juice that orange and save the juice to make a glaze if you want to make a glaze. A glaze is so simple. There is nothing to it. In fact, you could use water if you didn't have any juice. All right? So I'm going to show you how to make a glaze. I'm going to take just a small amount of orange juice and pour it in a bowl. And in there is probably a tablespoon. All right? Very small amount. And I'm going to add some powdered sugar. All right, and again, start small and you can add more as you need it. You can stir with a wire whisk or with a fork. And you'll be surprised how much sugar it's going to take. All right, so that is way too liquidy for a glaze, but it helps to incorporate your powdered sugar in steps rather than all at once. So I'm going to add some more powdered sugar. I'll add a little bit more. Here we go. And this is very, very quick. There you go. You have a glaze. All right, it's that simple. That's all there is to it. So this, I wanted to use orange juice for this since it's an orange glow and it has the orange in it already. If you didn't have orange juice, you could certainly use water. And I am just going to drizzle this over. And that tiny amount was perfect for the cake. Let's see if we can get the rest of this out of here. Okay, now, one thing that's very important with these cakes is you must slice them with a bread knife, serrated edge. If you try to slice this with a normal knife, it will completely smash the cake. So you just sit here and you slice like it's a piece of wood back and forth like a saw. And now I'm going to go 90 degrees from that. Okay. And granted, that's way too big a piece, so you can relax there. And now I'm going to cut this. Now in class, you'll probably have about 24 people. If you cut each quadrant or each fourth of a cake into 3 pieces, you'll have 12, and then cut each of those in half, you'll have your 24 for class. All right, so then you could cut this in half to serve to all of your classmates. Enjoy!